On the last episode of Menace, the Ken story. So much changed after Kenny died. I was no longer fearful of anything. One thing that I've learned is that fear is about loss. When you fear something, it's because you know you have something to lose. It's like you fear jumping off a cliff because you don't want to lose your life. You fear getting into trouble because you don't want to lose your freedom. I felt like I lost everything when Kenny died. And if I didn't have anything else to lose, then I didn't have anything else to fear. And I didn't care about anything. I was angry. That whole obituary thing played around in my head, and I couldn't let go of the feeling that things could have been different if Pops had been different. This is the thing. Kenny was 2 when Ma and Pops met. He was a baby. In the beginning, he never did a thing other than love Pops. From my very earliest memories, Pops never really accepted Kenny. There was always a sideways jab or a high yellow joke. It was never open, but kids aren't dumb. I noticed that I got treated differently than Kenny. And if I noticed, I know that Kenny did too. He was a lot of things, but he wasn't dumb. But Kenny never made me feel bad about the fact that Pops treated me better. In fact, he always made me feel like we were in something together, and I respected that about him. But Pops, how do you reject a child that just wants to love you and be loved? How do you take 2 kids and make an obvious difference between them? How do you watch a kid grow up and then put them out because you stole from them? And in death, how do you take away the only thing that he ever wanted from you? Acceptance. Pops didn't even give Kenny the respect of acknowledging him as his son on his obituary. I know Kenny was disrespectful, but he was just trying to get his licks back. Everything he did was because he knew that Pops didn't really accept him. Kenny could have scored from anybody. He chose Rob because he knew how Pops felt about him. He flaunted his money and took care of me and Ma because he knew that Pops was broke. He accepted a car from Rob, knowing that Pops didn't even have a car registered in his name. He came home in that car and told Pops that another man told me he couldn't drive it. Kenny wouldn't have done any of that if Pops would have just loved him, as he should have. And on the other side, maybe Kenny wouldn't even have been selling drugs if Pops was half the man that he was supposed to be. The guy that killed Kenny said, Tony said, "What's up?" I didn't know who Tony was at the time, but I felt like Kenny's murder was related to him selling drugs. Like maybe Tony was a rival drug dealer. Either way, Kenny felt like he had to step up, and that's what put him out there. But would he have made that decision if Pops had taken care of the family like he was supposed to? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But for the rest of my life, I lived with the idea that Pops sent him down that road. And with Kenny gone, somebody else had to step up. We had to live. That got decided for me on May 26, 1993 at 7:26 p.m. I was 15. Kenny would forever be paused in time. He was 18. Disclaimer. The Hot Boy character in this book is dedicated to the memory of Keyshawn Carr. Hot Boy is only reminiscent of Keyshawn in resemblance and likeness, but the storyline is no way indicative of his story or how he lived his life. With that being said, on April 17, 2022, Keyshawn lost his life to gun violence in Franklin, Virginia. He was 22 years old. Keyshawn welcomed a daughter, Aubrey, 4 days prior to his passing. The world would be blessed with his second daughter, Kehlani, months later. He would never be afforded the opportunity to meet her. Keyshawn was predeceased by his mother, Christy Carr, who I personally love to pieces. Left to cherish Keyshawn's memory and to continue his legacy are his father, Deshawn, and his siblings, Thasia, Nehemiah, Kimari, Sadiah, Nyla, Micah, Nathan, and Josiah. Y'all continue to be great and exemplify the strength that he would want y'all to have. Keyshawn was loved by all who knew him, and he continues to be missed. Sleep peacefully, Keyshawn. Love us. Chapter 7, Failure. Narrated by Shandora Warren. I sometimes think about how many people failed me. That ain't a cop-out. I know I did my own share of things that messed my life up. But for real, I'm thinking about it. Kenny got killed on May 26, 1993. I went back to school the day after the funeral. It was a Thursday. It was June 3rd, 1993. I went back to school like I didn't just see my brother get shot dead a week earlier. I tried to act like I was okay because I thought I needed to be. He wasn't coming back and I just needed to move forward. But emotionally, I was a mess. Now that I'm an adult, I realize that I should have been a mess. I also realize that the adults in my life should have recognized that too. Ma had an entire emotional breakdown when Grandma died. She stopped working and everything. It only got worse after Kenny. Meanwhile, I went to school 1 week later with all of that on me. It didn't take long for me to break either. It was one little thing that triggered me. The school day hadn't even started good yet. I was on my way to my first class. I was distracted and bumped into a dude in the hallway. It was nothing. The hallway was packed. It happened all the time. But he turned around and told me to watch where I was going. On a regular day, I probably would have laughed it off, but it wasn't a regular day, and I wasn't in a laughing mood. I turned to face the guy. "What's up?" I asked. I looked in his face, and I could tell he wanted to back down. And maybe I could have too, but something happened. There was a girl with him, probably his girlfriend. She started pulling him away and saying, "Tony, is not that serious." It's like I started seeing red. The last time I heard the name Tony, some dude said, "Tony said, what's up?" Then he shot my brother 5 times. Hearing her say that name triggered something inside of me, and I just went off. I jumped on the dude and started beating him, and I didn't stop. I felt somebody pulling me from behind, but I didn't really understand what was going on. I just turned around and started fighting them too. In my mind, it was somebody that was trying to help the other dude. It turns out that wasn't the case at all. She was the vice principal. Come on now. They know it wasn't my intention to fight that lady, or any lady for that matter. I wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't even know who she was. I honestly just blanked out. And why did she get in the middle of it anyway? I'm not taking away from what happened to her because she got messed up real bad, but the dude got messed up worse than she did, way worse. Seeing that, why would she be the one to break it up? Why would she put herself in the middle of a fight with 2 dudes? Whatever the case, it didn't go over well. If it was a regular fight, I would have gone down for 3 to 5 days. But because of the severity of it, I was expelled for the rest of the school year. The other dude didn't even get suspended because they looked at me like the aggressor. They failed me. Nobody tried to talk to me about what I was going through. Nobody considered the fact that I may have needed some help. They just got rid of me, just like they used to do to Kenny. The crazy part was, we had about 2 weeks left in the school year, but because I wouldn't be there to take my exams, they told me that I would fail for the year. I would have to repeat the 10th grade. When Mom came to pick me up, she was mad. I think she was just mad she had to come out of the house. She didn't even fight against me getting expelled and having to repeat the 10th grade. She failed me too. On the ride home, she did me just like she used to do Kenny. She said, "Why you do that, Ken? I just don't understand. Like we don't have enough going on." In my mind, I was thinking, really, Ma? You don't understand? You've been fighting Pops for years because he won't do what you want. You've been fighting women for years because you were mad that Pops chose them. After Grandma died, you started fighting Pops just because. And you don't understand? In that moment, I thought about it, and I realized that I fought that guy because I was angry. I was angry, and I was triggered when I realized that his name was Tony. I realized that for the rest of my life, I would probably hate everybody named Tony, Anthony, Antonio, or anything else that could be broken down into Tony, simply because I thought somebody named Tony wanted my brother dead. But I also realized that I couldn't say that, because if I did, Mom would probably have picked that up too. I didn't want her to have that. I didn't want her to cry about Kenny that day. I didn't want her to hate everybody named Tony. So I turned to her and said, "I don't know," just like Kenny used to. Suddenly, I understood. I got home that day and Pops was on the couch looking crazy. He tried to ask about what happened in school. I walked right past him and went to my bedroom. We ain't have nothing to talk about. I turned on the same tape that I had listened to every day since Kenny died. It was the Menace to Society tape that he had bought from the mall that day. I listened to Straight Up Menace and bawled my eyes out. I kept thinking about how happy Kenny was that day. I flashed back to his smile when we were in the theater and how he quoted the lyrics to that song right before he died. I grow up to be a straight up menace. Then I thought to myself, man, he ain't even get the chance to grow up. In that moment, I really didn't care about much of nothing. I didn't even care about my own life. At that point, I could easily have killed myself. The only thing that stopped me was the fact that Ma had lost Grandma and Kenny in less than a year. I knew that losing me would have been too much for her to handle. And that was the only thing that kept me there. Otherwise, I would have put a bullet in my brain. A part of me kept wishing that the dude had killed me too. That would have taken the whole decision away from me. But then again, there was Ma. I rolled myself into a ball in my bedroom floor, and I woke up in that exact same spot the next morning. The next day was a Friday. I woke up bright and early because my body was programmed to go to school. But I wasn't going to school. I wouldn't be going to school anymore that school year because some dude named Tony told me to watch where I was going. After it was all over, I realized that I could have handled the situation differently. Scratch that. I should have handled the situation differently. But that would have required some rational thought, and I didn't have that at the time. So all I could do was reflect back to something that Kenny said to me on the day that he died. I asked him how he knew so much stuff, and he said, I messed up a lot. I decided to take that with me on that day. All the advice that Kenny had given me was based on the fact that he had messed up and learned his lessons. I decided to do the same thing. I was out of school, and I couldn't take that back. All I could do was learn the lesson. But for that day, it was Friday. And as far as I was concerned, I was on an early summer vacation. So I decided to make the best of it. I got up and took a shower, planning to spend the day in our old apartment complex. I still knew a lot of people out there, and I thought it would be good for me to get out of the house. I was going to ask Ma to drop me off, but then something happened. I saw Pops picking up Kenny's car keys. What you doing? I asked. Pops told me that he was leaving out, like he really had a claim to Kenny's car. All I could say was, oh no. I snatched them keys out of his hand and headed right towards Kenny's car. Pops ain't say a word. I don't know what I thought they were going to do with Kenny's car, but I knew that wasn't going to be it. So I drove Kenny's car out that day. I didn't even have a driver's license, just a learner's permit. That interaction with Pops changed my whole plan. While I had originally planned to hang out for the day, I was reminded that there were things that I actually needed to do. Kenny's death had left a gap in the family's finances. So I set out to find Rob. That wasn't so hard. I knew where he lived, so I made my way there. I didn't know what the plan was. I didn't really have a plan. I hadn't heard anything from Rob since Kenny died, and we didn't really talk before then. I saw him at the funeral, but we didn't talk then either. I knew he was probably hurt too. Kenny and Rob were tight, like real tight. Rob was way older, but he treated Kenny like he was a strange mix between a brother and a son. I felt like maybe he'd take a chance on me out of respect for Kenny. Boy, was I wrong. It turned out to be the exact opposite. Knowing that I was Kenny's brother, I was led into the house with no questions asked. Rob flashed a quick grin and told me to have a seat. He asked, "How you holding up, little man?" I didn't try to pass off the lie. I wasn't doing well. I had witnessed my brother get killed just over a week prior to that point. It wasn't worth the lie. I replied, "Well, you know." And that was it. Understanding what that meant, Rob responded, "Yeah." He quickly changed the subject, easing the tension a little bit. "What can I do for you, little man?" I cut right to the chase. I told Rob that I was there because I needed him to put me on. Rob looked at me in the way that someone does when they're trying to figure something out, but it didn't take him long to respond. He shook his head and said, "Nah, your brother ain't want you getting into this." It didn't take me long to respond either. Without hesitation, I said, "My brother ain't here." Rob paused for a second, then delivered his verdict. He said, "Look, LeMan, this is a grown man's game, and it's a lot of stuff that I ain't got the time to teach you. Kenny was your brother, but y'all different. He had a different type of grit that you ain't got, and it probably got him killed. He didn't want you out here in these streets. And out of respect for him, I'm not going to be the one to put you out there." And that was that. Rob shut it right down. But I couldn't let it go like that. I mean, I could have, but I didn't want to. So I chose to plead my case. I said, "Rob, Kenny came to you because he needed something, and I'm coming to you for the same reason. My mama lost my grandma and Kenny in less than a year. She's sitting in the house going crazy. She ain't even working. And Pops, well, you know Pops, so I ain't even got to explain that. Kenny was all I had, and he's gone. Ain't nobody going to look out for me, so I got to do that for myself now. I know who Kenny was to you, and I ain't trying to be all that. I'm just trying to put some money in my pockets and help Ma out a little. Me and you both know that I could go somewhere else. But if Kenny trusted you, I can't think of nobody better for me to trust too. I just need a chance." Rob sat quietly for a second before he responded. "All right," he said. "I need you to do a little something for me. You do it right and we could talk." I was all ears. Rob explained the task. "I'm going to give you 10 bags of weed. They're worth $10 a bag. Bring me back $100 by next Friday and we could talk business. That's a whole week." I responded, "I bet." There was a young dude sitting on a nearby couch. Rob motioned for him to come over. The guy looked to be around my age, 15 to 17. He was tall and light-skinned with curly hair and a somewhat muscular build. I could tell right away that he was of mixed race. He kind of reminded me of Kenny. Rob whispered something to the guy, who quickly walked away. When he returned, he counted out 10 bags into the palm of my hand. Then he returned to the couch. He never spoke a word to me. Rob turned to me and said, "Friday, you know what happens to people when they don't pay me right. And if you get caught with this on you, keep your mouth shut about where you got it." I responded, "Yeah, I got you. But do you mean Friday or do you mean Wednesday?" Rob laughed. He never answered the question, but I remembered that Pops was supposed to pay him on a Friday and got pummeled 2 days before. I wasn't going to take that chance. I left feeling accomplished, but on edge a little bit. At the very least, I knew that he was willing to take a chance on me. So then I was on a mission. The same mission that I was on before I took Kenny's keys from Pops, but for a different reason. I was going to the projects. I knew somebody there wanted some weed, but I felt like I needed to sample the product first. What if it was garbage? I needed to know what I was taking out there. So I decided to take a bag for myself. I'd just pay for it. I parked the car and got some rolling papers that Kenny had left in the glove compartment. For the first time in my life, I smoked a joint by myself. That was something that I always used to do with Kenny at the dirt path. I don't know. A part of me felt like I was betraying him, but the other part of me felt that he would be proud that I was prepared to pick up where he left off. Somebody had to take care of Ma. It turns out that the weed was good. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was the same weed that me and Kenny had been smoking all along. Confident that I'd be taking something good to my people, I went out to my old neighborhood. I assumed that somebody would want weed. It turned out that a lot of somebodies wanted weed. I sold all 10 bags within a few hours of being out there. Excited to let Rob know that I had completed the task in far less time than expected, I went flying towards his spot. And of all things to happen, I got stopped by the police on the way. The officer asked to see my license and registration. I didn't have a license. I only had a learner's permit, and I wasn't supposed to be behind the wheel without a licensed driver in the car. The officer looked at the registration. Then he turned to me. "Do you remember me?" he asked. I shook my head. I had no idea who he was. The officer explained that he was one of the officers who responded when Kenny got killed. He told me that he was going to give me a break, but he didn't want to catch me driving again without my permanent license. He tapped the roof of the car and said, "Stay out of trouble," before walking away. I thought long and hard about how differently that could have played out. Just hours earlier, I had 10 separate bags of weed on me. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, that would have amounted to possession with the intent to distribute. If I would have gotten locked up, Ma wouldn't have had anybody. Not only that, but with me locked up, Pops would have had free range to Kenny's car. Ain't no way I'd let that happen. It goes back to something that I said before. Fear is about loss. And when I thought about it, I felt an obligation to Ma and to Kenny's legacy. I didn't want to fail them. Messing those things up had become legitimate fears of mine, so I had to make sure that everything fell in line. It killed me, but I knew I had to park Kenny's car until I got my driver's license. I got to Rob's spot and told him that I had sold all the weed. I also told him about the situation with the car and my license. I hated to, but I asked if I could park the car there for a little while. I didn't want to take it back home. The look on Rob's face told me that he was impressed. He shook his head and said, "All right, little man, I might have underestimated you." But that's not what I wanted to talk about. "What's my cut?" I asked. Rob looked confused. "What you mean?" That time, I was the one that was confused. So I repeated myself. "What's my cut? I sold the weed. I brought you back $100. What do I get out of that?" Rob started laughing. He said, "You get your foot in the door." I was mad. "So let me get this straight," I said. "I went out and sold your product for you because I needed money, but I'm not getting any money. I'm just getting my foot in the door. What if I'm hungry tonight? What am I eat? My foot?" Rob started laughing, and that made me even angrier. "This is going to be fun," he said. "I tell you what, you're right. You did better than I thought you were going to do. And if nothing else, that's worth something. Here's $50. You could park the car here until you get your license straight." Rob motioned for the mix boy to come towards him. "This is Hot Boy," he said. "He'll give you his pager number and he'll make sure you get around. Be ready for him to pick you up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning and come back with the humble attitude you heard earlier." Rob gave me $50 and directed Hot Boy to take me home. I had smoked one of the bags of weed, so I only made $40. The ride to my house was pretty quiet. Me and Hot Boy didn't know each other, and I guess there wasn't really much to say. But midway through the ride, he decided to address me. He said, "Hey, look, Rob don't play that slick stuff. He probably let you slide tonight because of Red Kenny, but that's your one." The saying, "that's your one," would end up being a whole thing, and I'd grow to hate it. I turned to look at Hot Boy, only he couldn't see me because it was dark. I didn't even know what to say to him, but I knew I was annoyed. I said, "Who told you to talk to me? You're just a driver, right?" Without saying a word, Hot Boy pulled over to the side of the road. He got out of the car, walked over to my side, and opened the door. "What you doing?" I asked. The dome light came on when he opened the door, so I could clearly see his face. He had the most mischievous of grins, and I thought to myself, this nigga wants to mess me up. Hot Boy stood at least a foot taller than me, and he outweighed me by 15 to 20 pounds. He pulled me by my shirt with both of his hands and yanked me out of the car. He threw me onto the ground so hard that I heard my bones cracking. Before I could even get myself together, Hot Boy turned me around and started punching me in the face. If I would have counted the punches, I'd say there were probably 10 to 12 of them. They were quick too, and I couldn't do nothing. When he was done, Hot Boy stood up and said, "Get in the car." I was so mad. Before I knew it, I rammed him in the stomach with my head, like a full-on bull attack. We were on the ground tussling. I was holding my own, even though he was much bigger than me. We went for a while until I heard him say, "Nigga, you cut me?" I immediately stopped in my tracks. It's like we both switched gears. We sat in the car, and I saw that Hot Boy had a piece of glass stuck in his leg. I told him to come to my house, and my mama would get him straight. Luckily, we were only about 5 minutes away. It turned out that it wasn't that deep, and Mom was able to take the glass out and clean it up. She told Hot Boy that he might need some stitches. "I'll be all right," that's what he said. I walked Hot Boy out of the house. He told me that he'd pick me up at 8 o'clock the next morning, like we didn't just fight to the death on the side of the roadway. Hot Boy left, and I told Ma some half-truth about how me and him had gotten into a fight. I left out the part about him being one of Rob's guys. But the second I came down off of the rush from the fight and the cut, I realized that there was something wrong with Ma. "What's going on?" I asked. Ma explained that her and Pops had gotten stopped by the police that morning, and they found some crack in the car. Unfortunately, Pops was in one of his drug dealer phases, so it was obvious that it wasn't personal use. It was individually bagged up, so they knew he was trying to sell it. But the issue was, it wasn't on Pops. It was in the glove compartment, so they couldn't say who it belonged to. Instead of Pops being honest and saying that it was his, he said he didn't know where it came from. And because Ma didn't snitch on Pops, they both got arrested. But Pops was high and he started resisting. He got into a fight with the cops. Pops got another charge on top of the drug charge, so he didn't get a bond. Ma did, though. Pops was such a nigga. I couldn't believe he let Ma get involved in that, but he did. That was just another thing that was hovering over us. He just kept failing the family over and over again. Hot Boy showed up at 8 o'clock the next morning, just like he was supposed to. We both looked like we had been boxing with Mike Tyson. Admittedly, I looked a little worse, though. I don't know how he felt, but I felt like absolute crap. We didn't talk for the entire ride to Rob's spot. When we got there, Rob looked at us and said, "Y'all get that mess settled?" We both nodded our heads. He said, "Good, because we got money to make." From that point forward, me and Hot Boy were like brothers. We set the whole summer on fire. And then it was time for me to go back to school. Thank you so much for listening. Please follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to purchase books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and some in hardback formats. Please like and follow this podcast, and feel free to share it with family, friends, and frenemies, because all relationships matter, even the toxic ones. Thanks so much for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.